As Mike said, I am Robin Emmons, the founder and executive director of So Much Good. And you may have heard about me if you've been here in Charlotte for the last few years, but even if you have not, it's okay. I'm going to share some of this story with you, but also provide you the backdrop of the story, which is the really important part. The thing to know is that my story entails my dropping out of corporate America, as Mike suggested, to begin unwittingly on a journey that I thought was to save the life of my older brother, who had been chronically homeless and chronically mentally ill living here on the streets of Charlotte for a full decade. Now, that experience with my brother provided me a thorough introduction to our criminal justice and our mental health systems here across the state. So the face of the story chronicles my advocacy on behalf of my brother to keep him from dying from the ravages of homelessness and then from falling through the cracks of our criminal and mental health systems, and then later from the adverse effects of consuming a steady diet of what I call fringe and franken foods that threatened his physical health and his hard-won well-being. Now, that provides the backdrop of my story, and it essentially began with a love and compassion for my brother and a desire to help him, and then not long after that, from my discomfort around the systematic denial of a basic human right for certain large groups of people to access healthy, clean, life-giving food. But then it dawned on me that it wasn't just this discomfort around this invisible line of demarcation relative to resources based on our individual ability to access a list of things that are largely based on the dynamics of power and privilege. It was actually in the fact that there is a fundamental stripping away of an equalizer in this framework of our social construct of the proverbial haves and have-nots. And the thing that is the equalizer that is stripped away when we look at it through the lens of our social construct is a thing that is innate to each of us, and we are given this thing at birth. And much like freedom, it is our inalienable right. And that thing is our God-given humanity. So when you think about it in those terms, then it's not difficult to understand that my biological connection to my brother, who I left corporate America to try to assist, is no different than my connection to you or you guys in the back, or to this gentleman here, William. So my friend William is a brilliant and beautiful human being who has worked alongside me at So Much Good growing sites over the course of the last few years. He also happens to be a master carpenter. He has assisted me in building storage sheds and raised beds and potting tables and moving soil and doing whatever else needs to be done at any one of our growing sites. And at the end of the day, William is able to maintain and solidify his human dignity by the kindness of people like Dale Mullinex, who just left this stage, because he too is homeless. And I love what Dale had to share around sometimes we as individuals become apathetic because we are overwhelmed around this issue of homelessness. And so when I talk about William and I feel this strong connection to him, I see his humanity, just regardless of his circumstance or position in life, but also because I can relate through my brother's experience. I can't tell you what it is like to be driving to a corporate tower on a cold January morning and to see your loved one standing on the corner with a hefty trash bag, getting on a city bus, riding around simply to keep warm. I cannot tell you the pain and anxiety and panic you feel when you hear a story on the news on a Saturday morning in January or February on the coldest of winter mornings, and there's a story about a man who has frozen to death behind a building on Freedom Drive or on an underpass, and you spend your weekend calling the coroner's office, or you spend your weekend calling the morgue or the police station, trying to figure out if that is your loved one. So this issue of homelessness is really weighty and personalized for me. So William, while he does not have a home, I am honored that he finds at least a temporary home when he comes to help at our growing sites and to serve in the mission of so much good. That same connection that I talk about with William also exists with this woman on the other side of the screen, and her name is Mary, but I call her Miss Mary out of respect and deference. She is my elder. Miss Mary is a grandmother who lives on the west side of Charlotte in a low-income community, and she visits the So Much Good farm stand in her neighborhood each Saturday. And I'm always tickled by this lady because when I see her, invariably she expresses her surprise and delight on 2 points. Number one, that we offer a purple sweet potato or some other cultivar that she remembers from her childhood growing up on a small farm in Millersville, Georgia. And number two, that I am her farmer. I get that a lot. In any case, Miss Mary has 5 grandchildren, and she's going to spend the better part of her Saturday preparing a big Sunday meal that she'll serve lovingly to her family. But she hangs out at the farm stand every single Saturday that she comes, lingering and sharing stories of family and food well beyond the point of her sales transaction. And it is in that interaction that I realize that Miss Mary considers me family, but also that she wants and needs the same things that my brother and William and we all need: to be seen, to be heard, and to be valued. So the real story of So Much Good is not really my dropping out of corporate America, but it is about my gradual awakening of consciousness, where yes, I noticed a problem not being addressed despite our wonderful and thriving local foods movement. And at the same time, I felt acutely the hollow emptiness in my existence in corporate America that really just valued and perpetuated the material gain of assets and supposed wealth at the expense of all else. So I experienced an awakening of consciousness that led me away from an existence dominated purely by economic principles to one dominated instead by humanitarian principles. And so when I experienced this awakening of consciousness, I began to understand that I could give up my scripted life, you know, the one that gave me the illusion of happiness, for the things that really matter to me and that matter to the world. I began to understand that for whatever issues or problems exist in my neighborhood, in my community, and in the world, I am the answer. And so are you. You know, that whole be the change thing? Yeah, it's true. It is true. It is absolutely our individual choices that will change our lives, our communities, and the world. So my brother, through his decade of homelessness, mental illness, and his eventual arrest, gave me an invaluable gift. And no, it's not the gift of so much good, but what he gave me was a freedom from the unbearable weight of the energy I spent suppressing my inner knowing that the choices that I'd made for my life up to that point would never bring me true wealth. They might allow me to continue my behaviors in amassing the symbols of wealth, but they would never bring true wealth. They would never bring me true fulfillment, nor would they cultivate the seeds of service and humanity that are at the core, the seeds of humanity who at the core we all are. So, as the story goes, my decision to drop out of corporate America did not come with a lot of thought. It was rather a circuitous route. So I want to share a little bit of that story with you. So I drove to work on a March morning in 2008, and I set my car and my mind on autopilot as I had done so many mornings before. And without any conscious thought or premeditation, I arrived at my place of work and sat at my desk and prepared to begin my workday. Except As I placed my fingers on the keyboard of the computer in front of me, something took over. And I began to type my own Jerry Maguire-like email manifesto that went in part something like this. After much thought, right, I have made the decision to leave the company. My last day will be April 1st. And no, this is not an April Fool's joke. Needless to say, my office colleagues immediately became abuzz with speculation and rumor about what might have caused this apparent impromptu announcement. But in the midst of it all, even without a plan, I was remarkably calm, even resolute, and somewhat relieved. Now, later that evening, I drove home and greeted my husband, and after our requisite exchange of, "How was your day?" I announced to my husband, "I quit my job today." Now, to understand his response or reaction or the lack thereof, you have to know a little bit about my husband. So I'll tell you that this is a guy who enlisted in the military for 4 years, but that wasn't quite enough, so he did it again for another 4 years. And then when he finished his 8 years of military service in the Army, he came home to North Carolina and decided that he wanted to join the Highway Patrol. So he served as 30 years as a North Carolina State Trooper. And so you're kind of getting the picture that this is a guy that maybe who likes structure, right? Just a little bit. So when I shared my news with him, he looked, well, simply just mortified. To which I responded, "Don't worry, babes, I have a plan." I can assure you I had no plan. And then, just about 2 weeks later, I received a phone call from a man who I had never met or spoken to. And what he told me was that my brother had been arrested and was sitting in the Mecklenburg County Jail and had been there for just about 2 weeks. And he had been arrested as a result of a violent outburst on the street where some property was damaged due to his then undiagnosed condition of schizophrenia. That phone call immediately freed me up. It released me from the worry about what my next move might be. And I began spending my days in mental health court and following my brother around the state as he was transferred from the Mecklenburg County Jail to Broughton Hospital in Morganton to Dorothea Dix in Raleigh and back to the county jail. And I really felt it important to do that, to show up wherever he was taken so that those responsible for his evaluation and his eventual fate would know he belongs to someone. And while showing up was all I could do for a long time, I continued to petition the court for guardianship to better advocate for my brother. And after about 8 months, my brother was released to my custody, and I had legal guardianship for him. And without a doubt, my journey had surely begun. So this is a story that some of you may have heard of how my husband came to mourn the loss of his riding lawnmower as I began to see this disparity in our local foods movement that did not include poor people or mentally ill people or homeless people that also need clean, healthy food. I called 50 of my closest friends and dug up my backyard and planted on every square inch of it, producing about 3,000 pounds of food in the first year for distribution to low-income neighborhoods. Thank you. And then from there, my husband is still mourning the loss of his riding lawnmower, I should tell you. The good news is we live in a subdivision, so I tell him that he should be very thankful that we do live in a subdivision, because if we didn't, I'd be ripping up that front lawn too. So he still has his push mower, so there's hope, right? And this is how I came to spend less time in my little red Volvo and more time on tractors and driving pickup trucks, because since this backyard expedition, We have grown to about 9 acres, and we're producing about 8 tons of food today for low-income communities. Thank you. And essentially, I'm telling you all this to say this is how I found my So Much Good. And at the end of the day, my story is really not unique. It is a story about all of us. It's a story about how we can all make the decision to move more consciously through the world, more awake, in a way that serves others and the best parts of ourselves. It's no secret that our community and our world are in need of healing. There are issues of hunger, poverty, homelessness, inequities in our food system, and many, many other social injustices. There is no shortage of opportunity for each of us to awaken to a life that is in service to humanity. So I encourage you to ask yourself, are you busy amassing the symbols of wealth while ignoring the urgent need all around you? Are you living a scripted life, like I was, instead of one of passion and purpose? What I'm asking you is, what is your so much good? The invitation is for you to discover and embrace humanity, to find that thing that the world needs, that makes your heart sing, because that is what the world most needs. Nelson Mandela said, "There is no passion to be found in living a life that is less than the one that you are capable." And years earlier, Dr. King reminded us that life's most urgent and persistent question is, what are you doing for others? So I challenge you to go boldly about the work of finding your so much good. I can tell you that it is truly an exciting and adventurous journey. And you'll know you're on it when you begin to not just recognize, but to acknowledge and to serve all people, regardless of their circumstance or position in life. And then, in an instant, you will know that the journey that seemed to be about so much else was really a journey to your true and authentic self. Thank you, and namaste.